Close your eyes and imagine the roar of artillery echoing across a muddy hellscape. The acrid smell of cordite fills your lungs as screams cut through the chaos. Your leg is torn open by shrapnel, blood pooling beneath you in the cold European mud. The nearest aid station is miles away through enemy territory, and your unit's medic lies motionless nearby. In your pocket, a field dressing, maybe some sulfur powder, and whatever else you can scavenge. What you do in the next 10 minutes decides whether you live to see tomorrow. Welcome to the Lost Tactician. Today, we descend into the desperate theatres of World War II to uncover the story of battlefield medicine when conventional care was a luxury. This is the tale of ingenuity born from necessity, of soldiers turned improvised surgeons, and the thin line between life and death crossed through sheer resourcefulness. The desperate battlefield, a race against time. World War II created a medical crisis of staggering scale. From Normandy to Bastogne to the Pacific Islands, young men died not only from wounds, but from the long wait for treatment that often never came. The golden hour of trauma care, so critical today, was rarely possible then. Medics were outnumbered, supplies ran dry, and modern warfare inflicted devastating injuries on an unimaginable scale. A single artillery barrage could produce dozens of casualties, overwhelming any organized response. Hemorrhage accounted for nearly half of all potentially survivable battlefield deaths, often worsened by shock, exposure, and infection. Advances like sulfur drugs, plasma transfusions, and improved surgery meant little if a soldier bled out before help arrived. So soldiers became their own doctors. The battlefield became a brutal laboratory of improvisation, where innovation was driven not by theory, but by the will to survive. Ingenuity born of necessity. Improvised tools and techniques. When medical supplies ran out, soldiers used whatever they could find. Rifle cleaning rods became splints. Parachute silk, smooth and relatively clean, was turned into bandages. They sterilized tools with boiling water or even urine when nothing else was available. Maps were torn into strips for tourniquets. The waxy paper from ration packs served as an occlusive dressing for chest wounds, a crude one-way valve that allowed air out but not in, anticipating modern pneumothorax treatment. Stopping hemorrhage demanded creativity. When official tourniquets were gone, soldiers made their own from rifle slings, bootlaces, or uniform strips, using a stick or tent peg as a windlass. They learned that a tourniquet had to stop blood flow completely, not just slow it. For other wounds, they packed injuries with moss, spare socks, or any absorbent material on hand. Moss, cleaned and boiled, proved surprisingly effective thanks to its absorbency and mild antiseptic qualities. Soldiers, also learned to treat shock through experience. They would elevate legs on ammo boxes or helmets, share body heat to fight hypothermia, and keep the wounded talking just to keep them conscious. None of this really came from textbooks. It came from watching who lived and, sadly, who didn't. Now the medic's burden was something else entirely. Combat medics carried a weight that went far beyond their physical packs. Most had, just 16 weeks of training before being thrust into chaos that would test even the most seasoned doctors. They entered battle with supplies that barely lasted through a single engagement, forced to decide, sometimes in seconds, who got morphine, who got sulfur powder, and, heartbreakingly, who had to wait. Marked by red crosses that were supposed to protect them, medics still fell at alarming rates. They treated wounds under fire, sometimes performing crude surgery in foxholes by flashlight. They triaged with brutal efficiency, making instant decisions that honestly haunted them for life. Realizing they just couldn't be everywhere at once, a lot of medics taught nearby soldiers basic life-saving skills: how to recognize arterial bleeding, apply dressings, or position an unconscious comrade to keep his airway open. These impromptu lessons, they multiplied their reach and saved countless lives, but the psychological toll It was absolutely crushing. Medics held dying men, made promises they couldn't keep, and bore the weight of every failure. Yet through all that suffering, they advanced medicine. Their field improvisations, rapid hemorrhage control, prevention of shock, early intervention, became really the cornerstones of modern trauma care. Unsung heroes, stories of survival and sacrifice. The war's archives, they overflow with stories of ordinary soldiers who simply refused to die, men who used strips of uniform to bind gaping wounds, others who survived sucking chest injuries because someone somehow improvised a seal from ration paper. Some fashioned belts into tourniquets and endured excruciating pain for hours, knowing that loosening it meant certain death. One paratrooper, during Operation Market Garden, took a burst of machine gun fire to the leg. Separated from his unit, he used his belt as a tourniquet, packed the wound with torn Bible pages, and splintered his leg with branches. He lay hidden for 18 hours before rescue. Infection nearly killed him later, but his quick thinking saved him long enough for antibiotics to finish the job. Stories like his, well, they were repeated thousands of times, most never recorded but no less real. Many soldiers described entering a strange, focused calm during such moments, a dissociative state where fear vanished and only action remained. That mental shift, now recognized by psychologists, allowed men to perform complex first aid despite severe injury. The body's will to survive was matched by the mind's power to adapt. The improvised medicine of World War II laid the groundwork for modern combat casualty care. Today's tactical combat casualty care protocols, rapid hemorrhage control, aggressive shock prevention and early intervention, were born from those desperate lessons. The modern combat application tourniquet traces its design directly to those improvised windlass devices of the 1940s. Equally important is the principle that every soldier should know basic first aid. In World War II, when medics couldn't reach everyone, lives depended on shared knowledge. That lesson continues in modern militaries and even civilian emergency response training. These stories also reveal something deeper about the human spirit. The soldiers who practiced improvised medicine weren't doctors. They were farmers, clerks, and students who discovered within themselves extraordinary creativity and resolve. They proved that innovation isn't confined to laboratories. Sometimes, the greatest breakthroughs emerge from the mud and chaos of necessity. Their legacy is more than medical, it's moral. It reminds us that preparedness isn't just about equipment, but mindset. The ability to act decisively with whatever tools we have, courage, compassion, and resourcefulness can turn despair into survival. As we look back from an age of advanced trauma care and technology, we owe a debt to those who learned through suffering. Every modern paramedic, combat medic, and emergency responder carries echoes of their hard-won wisdom. The battlefield medicine of World War II shows that even in humanity's darkest hours, ingenuity and courage can thrive. These soldiers faced death armed only with their wits and will, and saved lives against impossible odds. They deserve to be remembered not just as casualties, but as pioneers who pushed medical knowledge forward through necessity and compassion. Their legacy lives in every act of improvised care, every person who refuses to freeze in crisis and instead asks, "What can I do with what I have?" If these stories moved you, if they've deepened your respect for the forgotten innovators who fought a second war against death itself, then subscribe to The Lost Tactician. Share this video with someone who needs to hear these stories of resilience and resourcefulness. The past has much to teach us. Within each of us lies that same capacity for courage and innovation. The question isn't whether we have it, it's whether we'll recognize it when the moment comes.